The meeting will begin in 60 seconds.
It's okay if I just say Rex, since Rex is the only one in the audience. Are we live?
Yep, we should go.
I'm calling this meeting of the Charter Revision Commission meeting to order. Welcome committee members, staff, and audience in the meeting. Our first item will be the approval of the minutes from November 12th. Those have been circulated. Are there any amendments to the minutes dated December 12th, 2015?
Move approval.
Second.
Aguilar.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Old business. As you recall, we had requested some drafting to be done on a few items. The first one was from Charter Article 1, City Council, Section 202C, Election and Terms. Mr. Fifley, do you have something drafted for us to review?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Pursuant to the Commission's request, we have some proposed language, and that is also on SIRE for the public to view as well. In Part C of Section 202, we added the language where, as it says now, a council member can't serve more than 2 full or partial terms. It accepts out a partial term that was for 50% or less of the full term. Then the council member may serve an additional 2 full terms. And pursuant to the discussion of our last meeting, we had a situation where a counselor is appointed to fulfill the remainder of a term that says perhaps 1 year left. This would allow that counselor then to run for re-election for 2 full terms.
Okay. And this is only consecutively?
Correct.
But after they set out, they can certainly run again?
Correct.
Okay. Any discussion on that wording? I think it embodies what we had discussed. Thank you for your excellent drafting.
Thank you.
The next item is, we had a motion, didn't we?
We want it to. Mr. Chairman, I guess at this point, the commission probably should decide if it's acceptable. Do you want to do your vote on it, or would you prefer do your vote now, or would you prefer that we place the items that you want into your final report and then vote in the aggregate on the final report? I think it'd be maybe work better if you voted on each one in case there's an item or two that causes some disagreement if it's in the aggregate in a whole report, but I leave it up to the board's discretion.
So, I guess when we were appointed as commission, this is the, I think what we're looking at now is the end result is what will we be putting on the ballot for the election this spring. And so I think as we're working our way through the entire charter, it's those items, and do we want to handle those individually? We can certainly, I think, one of the options would be to approve them now, but then put them on a list, but then in our January meeting, take a vote as to which of those we would see putting forward to be recommended to go on to the ballot. Mr. Smith.
I agree.
Mr. Chairman, I would propose that we simply make the motions now to actually put them on the ballot for the amendments that have been drafted for sections 2.02 and 3.02. The reasons for that being these come from member Ms. Aguilar. I think they're excellent ideas. I think they're important based on the explanations that she's given of some situations that have happened in the past. I think they make sense. So barring any major amendments that might be forthcoming to Articles 7, 8, and 9, which I suppose that'll be at the meeting later, I would be comfortable with a motion to put this on the ballot so that we're not scrambling at the end.
Okay. Now, one of the items you did do is you mentioned 302, which we were going to talk about a little bit later in the agenda, but I think the wording is extremely similar.
And I am out of order, Mr. Chairman. I apologize.
Okay. But would I take that as a motion that the change in 202C, you would recommend at least tentatively to be placed on the ballot?
That will be my motion, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion?
Second.
There's a second. So if I understand this, then what it would be is that would be there, but in our January meeting, if we wanted to change, if there are other items percolate up higher on the list, we could do that? Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The next item is 204, compensation expenses. And this had to do with, I think, some language about the employee benefit retirement plans and retirement system. And I think, again, Mr. Pfeiffer, you have a draft on that as well.
Mr. Chairman, and the third line from the bottom, it's also posted on SIRE. It is excluding the language after employees where it says excluding the city pension system, period. We don't have a city pension system for any new incoming people. This would just clarify that the mayor could not be eligible for a city pension system that's now been closed to any new participants. And then as a housekeeping matter, with Ms. Hainzel's assistance, I want to thank her too. We also propose that we delete the however and then make that upon taking office, the mayor may elect to participate in the employee's retirement system. And what the retirement system is now is we participate in the state retirement system through the state of South Dakota. So.
Okay. I think everyone, does everyone have a clear understanding of what that would be? It probably clarifies language that it cannot participate in a plan that no longer exists.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that this change to section 2.04 be placed on our list to consider for our final meeting, since it is primarily a formula change or a drafting change and doesn't have a real substantive effect. I would say this one we can wait to consider to see how much room we have at the last meeting.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I think you did a very good job on your explanation, Mr. Smith. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, again, unanimously. And so that one will be on our list of possible items in January. 214, I think is the next one. 214, updating the Code of Ordinances. And again, I think the draft, how are you going to read this one?
Mr. Chairman, this simply deletes the portion in 214 where it specifies years. So it just says we will do it according to state law, and state law says that we'll do it once every 20 years. So it was last done in 2012.
So this would save us from making that change in 32 as well. Yes. Any questions, any comments?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the change to section 2.14 also be placed on our list of possible items for our final meeting.
I'll second.
Any further discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So at this point, we have one that we're recommending for the ballot, two that's on the list of possible items for the ballot, and 302, I think is very similar to 202.
It is, Mr. Chairman, it's the same language. Again, for a refresher, it's taken from the, I believe, what the constitutional amendment regarding presidential terms. We just took the same principle that if you serve less than half of a term, you should still be eligible for 2 full consecutive terms beyond that, and it's the exact same language as for a city councilor. It would apply to a mayor also.
Does someone want to make a motion on that?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the amendment to section 3.02 be placed on the ballot.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And I think the last one that we had requested drafting on was 401. Again, Mr. Pfeiffer, if you could, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the Commission's direction last time, this is a proposal that sets forth the intention that every department director or head of any department should that is appointed by the mayor shall be effective with the advice and consent of the council. It is then deleting the next sentence about the 5% threshold of either the number of employees or the number or the amount of the city budget total. As we discussed last time, there were 2 out of the 12 directors that fell below that threshold, and I think historically it's been about 1 or 2 every time, and obviously the budget fluctuates depending on how the council sets it, and the number of employees is usually pretty much the same, but a few of them are appointed regardless. Like for our office, the city attorney is appointed regardless because it's under a separate section under charter, but in terms of the other 11, yeah, it just depends on that 5% threshold. So.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that this amendment be placed on the 2016 April ballot.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. We have now then 3 items that we have voted to put on the ballot, 2 that are on the items to be considered for the ballot that will be addressed at our January meeting. So now we can go on to new business. Thank you for all the work done on the drafting. And we have, when we set this up, that at this meeting we would talk about Charter Article 6, 7, and sorry about that. I missed the one in the Roman numeral on 7, 8, and 9. I was wondering how that was working out. It's not divisible by 3. So on Articles 7, 8, and 9. So Article 7 is general provisions. Section 701, conflicts of interest. Board of Ethics. Any items on that? 702, prohibitions.
Mr. Chair, under 1, I suggest the addition of sexual orientation. As applies to discrimination.
So that would be under 702A1.
Yes.
Okay, so would that be a request to have that change drafted for our consideration at our next meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That we'll consider that at our January meeting. Anything else on 702?
Mr. Chairman, for the benefit of the public, it sounds like they may not have been able to hear what the proposed change was.
It would be on 702A1, where it talks about no person shall be appointed to or removed from or in any way favored or discriminated against with respect to any city position or point of city administrative office because of race, gender, age, handicap, religion, country of origin, or political affiliation, and to that list would be inserted sexual orientation. I think that was the proposed change.
Yes.
And I think following our protocol that would be then drafted and presented at our January meeting.
Yes.
With that, on Article 7, is there any public input on this item?
Bruce Danielson. I wanted to speak on the Board of Ethics issue. That I'm probably one of the few in this room that's been involved in any Board of Ethics issues. And I'd like to draw attention to a Board of Ethics meeting from last April. As a private citizen, we don't know all of the ins and outs of how to do this properly. And so I made a mistake in the first of the two efforts that I put in to bring an issue to the public in regard to the election of last year. And the use of city funds was the crux of what I was doing. But we ran into an issue, what we discovered in this whole process, that we had the mayor never showed up for either of the Board of Ethics, the Ethics Board meetings that were called to discuss a particular issue. And the city attorney decided to become the personal attorney for the mayor and defend the mayor. And we never, as citizens, got a chance to ask the mayor why he did things the way he did. He had a surrogate arrive. And it brought attention to one of the issues that the City of Sioux Falls has in the charter and the way that these types of boards are set up, is that only people that are appointed to these boards actually have allegiances to just the mayoral office, and that none of these other boards have any shared allegiances to the council, which is the other governing body of the city. And so I'd like to ask if there's a way that we could consider, especially starting out with the ethics board, a way to share that responsibility of who's appointed to these boards and how they're selected. Been doing some research with other cities around the country, and I found a situation down in Omaha where they were having an issue. And what they did is they they allowed the boards to alternate between control from the mayor's office and the council office. So that way they'd be able to bounce back and forth, and there would not be a situation where you would have a 5-0 vote just because you brought an issue forward. We've also seen in the past where the ethics board has been allowed to be used for political retributions. And that might be a hard word to say, but that's essentially what's been happening. And so if you look over the last number of years, when there has been a disagreement of one sort or another, the ethics board ends up having the final say in an issue, and it's a joke. And for those of us that have been doing the activism, or whatever you want to call what we do, we'd like to be able to feel like if we see something, we have some place where we can actually go and have it judged by our peers. And right now, things are already set up that we're just drummed out of the room. I had the chairman of the ethics board was actually a former employee that we had fired over 35 years ago. And he sat in judgment over the complaint that I brought. And he forgot that he even knew me. You know, these are the types of issues that we have, where he should have recused himself. The city attorney should have never stepped down from his position on the ethics board. And he left the ethics board without an attorney to replace him. So those individuals that were sitting in the room, and I believe there were only 4 of them that were of the 5 sitting in the room, they had no guidance from the city attorney as to how the process was to function. And so they had to sit there, and one of the members happened to be an attorney, not an ethics attorney, so he didn't really know all the rules, so they had to kind of make it up as they went. And that the whole Board of Ethics process is either needs to be fixed or just strike it completely out of the system, because the way it stands right now, it's a complete joke. And I'd love to talk to any of you about the process. Having now brought 3 charges to the ethics board through the different things, and have seen how the system gets gamed and played and never really answers anything, and the citizens just don't like that process. So I thank you, and I would love to talk to any of you in the future.
Thank you. Article 8, Charter Amendment. 801 is proposal of amendment.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question for the city attorney. We talked about clarification items and housekeeping measures. It seems to me that when they're those type of items, to take them before the voters, is there another way around it, I guess, is what I'm asking? Because I know with our ordinances and whatever, if we find that it's a house, I believe that if it's a housekeeping matter, that it does not have to be, again, voted on by the council. It's just taken care of. I don't know if that's an option within the charter itself.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'd want to mull that over a bit more, Commissioner Aguilar, but I think with the import of the charter, it'd probably be a little different in terms of changing even some word choice or doing some housekeeping items without voter approval on the charter. It could, no matter how minutia we think it may be, as Mr. Smith knows, it could change how a court could rule on an interpretation. The times when we do make some clerical corrections with, say, some ordinances or resolutions, those are more if there was some, like, description that was a little off. It doesn't change the intent of this goes to that or what have you. But I hope I'm explaining that enough. But
No, thank you. I was just wondering if there was a way to not fill up the ballot with things that are as we call them, housekeeping matters. But I understand, thank you.
That resolves your question?
Yeah. Unless he has something else.
Okay. Thank you. 802 is election. And 803 is adoption of amendment. Any comments or suggestions on those? Is there any public input on this item? Hearing none, we'll move on to Article 9. Transition separability provision. 901 is officers and employees. 902, departments, offices, and agencies. 903, pending matters. 904, state and municipal laws. Sorry about that. 904 is state and municipal laws. 905, schedule. 906, separability. Any comments on those? Is there any public input on Article 9? Okay. Is there any additional public input at this time? It would appear to me that in our January meeting, which is Wednesday, January 6th? On Wednesday, January 6th, that on our agenda would be that we have 3 items that we voted on today to recommend for the ballot. We have 2 items for consideration. We have 1 item from today that will be drafted for consideration in January. And so, Mr. Fifley, you'll have 1 more drafting task, I believe.
And Mr. Chairman, I will prepare a report a draft report for the Commission's consideration, and logistically what happens is that report then is delivered to the city clerk, and that sets forth the ballot process in terms of whatever proposals this commission has then would go on to the voters. And part of that will include explanations as required by state law of the city attorney. And I think the proposals that you have recommended thus far and are likely to recommend or not at the next meeting, those will all be pretty simple explanations. So, but I will have all that for your consideration, hopefully, January 6th.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. Just one other request I'd make of Mr. Fifley, as he prepares the report on the proposed amendment to Section 7.02A sub 1, would be if you would be so kind in your office to prepare some kind of at least summary of some of the legal implications of making the requested change in terms of potential litigation, conflict of law issues, maybe preemption, et cetera, with both federal and state laws. I don't, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything serious, but if your office would be so kind as to provide that when you provide the drafting. Thank you.
For your information, the sexual orientation is already covered by executive order in terms of non-discrimination. So other than about 17 or 18 appointive offices, sexual orientation is already a protected class within the city employment.
Is that also an ordinance or just executive order?
It's executive order.
So this change would put it into the city charter, which governs then, which supersedes or is over the ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like I'm getting quite the education on this. So, are there any other comments? Anything else to be considered at this meeting? If not, we stand adjourned.